Morning, guys. Wanted to touch base a little bit on the trailer equipment that people use to hotshot. Um, I've heard from a couple people when I make this type of comment that it kind of frustrates them because it's their business and they feel like I'm demeaning it, like I'm somehow putting it down. Um, Nothing like that. It's more what I've learned using equipment under more severe circumstance. So this is one of the trailers that we own. We have a couple hot shots that we ran in the oil field. Of course, oil field died down, and so we kind of parked the equipment. Um, it's just not making money, so it makes no sense. These oil companies require very high insurance coverages. We're talking $1 million commercial auto, $2 million general liability, a $5 million umbrella. In our case, because we transport fluids with tankers, we need to have $1 million pollution policy, um, long-term legal liability policy, and contractors liability policy. And that's on top of the workman's comp and other insurances that you need, to cover your own property and such. So we stopped the oil field operation and refocused on, or I should say, just shifted our focus on over the road. Um, but so this is an example of, believe it or not, this is, I believe, a 22,000 pound gross vehicle weight trailer. It's a 30-foot PJ with a 10-foot hydraulic tail. Some of you are going to say, well, without a 40-footer, you can't make any money. Remember, we did true hot shot. I didn't move pipe. If I was going to move pipe, I'd get a 48-foot straight deck trailer, flatbed, and move with the semi-truck pipe. You have to remember, when I say oil field, we're talking the Permian Basin, which has some of the roughest roads anywhere in the country. By roughest roads, I mean the dirt roads. I don't mean the asphalt roads. I mean you're off-road. And so this is actually, believe it or not, a non-CDL setup. We derated it, and what I had them do, there you can see the tail down, and obviously it's dual tandems. But what we did is we singled it out. We went to the provider super singles. They have higher ply rated tires, and believe it or not, those 4 tires have, I want to say, combined all 4, it was a little bit more capacity than the 8 individual tires. And so this is actually better. I never had a blowout with these. We ran these off-road 90% of the time. And again, I don't need a bigger trailer because 9 times out of 10, when we got a call, it was 2 pallets, and it was 4,000 pounds at the heaviest. Occasionally, a couple contractors that I knew locally would call and say, hey, can you come pick up my skid steer with an attachment? I'm falling behind. And so, having the ramp for that was ideal. So if I were to buy an over-the-road non-CDL hotshot, this seems to come up a lot, I wouldn't do the 2 7,000-pound axles or even the 2 8,000-pound axles. I know Alex over at Tow Piglet is pretty happy with his newest setup. That was 2 8,000-pound axles with the Torque Flex setup. Honestly, I would step up the game and go to these 10,000-pound axles. You get thicker axle tubes, higher spring rates, bigger brakes, bigger everything. Now here's where I offend people, because honestly, this setup is still, even equipped this way, not truly commercial grade. In my opinion, this is basically an RV setup that was put on steroids and made a little bit heavier duty, but ultimately, when you take this apart and you look at all of its components, It's the same thing you find under recreational vehicle, only everything's a little bit bigger. If you compare this to a semi-truck, you know, I've never had to replace a broken axle on one of my semis, even in the oil field, even with as heavy as we run. You know, do we have blowouts? Well, sure. You know, when you run off-road 90% of the time, you know, and then it's 110 out and you're running 80,000 pounds and you jump out on the highway, you know, you're going to have these tires blow out because they got old, they got abused, you know, however you want to put that. But honestly, if I were doing a non-CDL, over-the-road, hotshot setup, I would do something like Tow Piglet did and get the 40-foot non-CDL setup, but I would equip it with this running gear. Yes, you would sacrifice some weight. You know, this is going to be heavier than your two 7,000-pound axles, but you're never going to put these up to their maximum capacity. You're never going to load these to their max. You're going to be running reserve capacity with all of your running gear. You're going to benefit from much better braking capacity. You're going to benefit all around. You'll sacrifice a little bit of weight, but I'm pretty comfortable you're going to spend less time on the side of the road replacing broken axles, replacing tires, that kind of thing. This tire here by itself has the same capacity as a dual in the CDL setup. It's basically the same axle, and what they've done is they went to a tire and wheel combination that has the same weight rating as two. And so if you look at my trailer rolling down the highway, this is a non-CDL setup. When I put this behind my pickup truck, I could have used a better picture, one where the thing was clean, but this is how this truck looks 90% of the time, because, you know, when it's out working, it's out working. And so, yes, it has aftermarket tires on it. Yes, it has a leveling kit, but that was so we could fit, that was so we could fit this bigger tire. And so this tire, I don't remember what its ply rating was. It was either 10, 12, or 14, something like that. But it has a 4,000-pound payload, 4,000-pound capacity per tire. So when you look at all four of them, rubber-wise, we have 16,000 pounds worth of rubber capacity. That's just the tire, not axles, not anything else. And don't blow me up saying you can't put 16,000 pounds on that truck. I know this, but what we did is we went overrated on everything so that the abuses of the oil field don't cause failures. And to that end, you know, this little setup is basically, it's a chemical used in the fracking process. It's a liquid we add to the water at the point of purchase for the client. And what most trucking companies do is they have like a 55-gallon drum at the yard, and they go by the yard, they pick up the 5-gallon bucket that they need, and then they just add it to their load at the point that they're going to unload. And so what we did is we just took a chemical tote, you know, strapped it down to a trailer, put it on location, and then the driver can come here and grab it while on location. But again, getting back to the idea of, you know, overkilling everything, if I remember right, this particular trailer has dual 5,000-pound axles on it, and if I remember right, and the payload of that particular tote is like 2,500 pounds when filled to the top. And typically what we would do is we would go out to location, and the company that sold us this product would come to the location and fill it there. And so 9 times out of 10, it wasn't even loaded. But again, this goes to the idea, you know, we could have done a single 4,000-pound axle, but we always overkill in the oil field. So likewise with the rubber on the pickup truck, no, this is not an over-the-road hotshot setup. Our usual radius was within 100 miles was the typical load. We on purpose went non-CDL so that before they changed the law recently, so that if the client needed us to go run into Odessa for a load, that was within a 150-mile radius, and the driver could go without an E-log, and I could put any driver in it. I didn't have to have a CDL driver. So with that being said, in every aspect, we went heavier duty than we needed. I know when you're a new guy, just starting up, wanting to buy your equipment, two things happen. You want to buy something quick, it's already at the dealership, and you want to buy yourself that Big Tex GN16 because it's there, it's ready, it's got the right capacity you need. You know, all you got to do is derate it, and 3 months down the line, you've replaced a couple tires, and you just had an axle failure. Now you're sitting around wondering why you can't get an axle. Well, the reason you can't get an axle is because so many of these things fail that, aside from new production, when these companies order their axles to build new, you know, so many of them are failing in the field that they can't keep up with both ends of that production. You have to remember, before Hot Shop became trendy, you know, the sale of these types of goosenecks was for, you know, your small contractor that wants to move his skid steer to a construction site, you know, the farmer that moves his tractor, you know, occasionally he loads it up with some hay bales. And so now they're selling 10 times more equipment than they used to before. And so, you know, one of the manufacturers, and I'm not going to try and name names and criticize or anything, you know, their big claim to fame is they have an engineered beam. Almost all semi-trailers have an engineered beam. You know, why is that? Well, because they build these things in massive quantities where the engineering money comes back to them pretty quickly. These things, you know, were almost like a one-off design, and only recently are they really producing these things in bigger quantities because so many people are trying to get into hot shotting. And so the technology and the design going into these things never really evolved like your heavy-duty trailers have. You know, your heavy-duty trailers have ABS. They have air pressure management systems. You know, now to move axles back and forth, you no longer manually pull pins. You know, you go pull a little valve and the axles slide. I'm sure it already exists. If not, it's only a matter of time before you can make that, you know, a solenoid run electrical circuit from the dash of the truck, and the driver won't even have to get out of the truck. Anyways, getting back to the idea of these things, they're not truly commercial grade. And I know people are going to blow me up for it. These things were intended to be, you know, that farmer that maybe puts 5,000 to 10,000 miles on it a year, and you guys are doing that in a month, and then you wonder why you're replacing tires every couple months, you're replacing axles a couple times a year. It kind of boils down to that. They're not commercial grade. It's no different than, you know, you're grabbing an F-350 pickup truck and expecting to put 500,000 miles on it. The trucks weren't really designed for that. They were truly built for that guy that's gonna cruise it around town because he's got, you know, the cool guy lift, and, you know, he put it on 24s, and occasionally he hooks up his whatever his weekend toy is, whether it's, you know, a race car, whether it's a bunch of quads, a boat, an RV, whatever, and that guy tows occasionally. And yes, you know, companies obviously use them for work, but your over-the-road hot shotter is taking it way to the extreme, and all of this equipment deteriorates much quicker. So I guess the heart of my opinion here is overbuild anything you're going to put over the road. I'm not saying buy this heavier chassis for a non-CDL, because in my case it did reduce the payload capacity by quite a bit. The trailer is pretty heavy for a non-CDL setup, But if I put a CDL driver in it, as long as I don't exceed the 20,000-pound axle rating, and as long as my truck is properly registered for it, within our own state, we could legally still haul 30,000 on this setup, and we never had an issue with it. And some of you are going to blow me up and say, no, that's not right. You're going over your gross vehicle weight rating. There's technically no law that says you can't. You only cannot go over your axle rating, and you cannot go over your wheel rating, which we don't. We legally stay within that. The only thing we go over is the gross vehicle weight rating, but as long as the driver is properly licensed, you can do this. So again, my point being here, if you're going to do a non-CDL, I would buy a non-CDL model trailer and put a wheel and tire and axle combination under it that's equivalent to this one. And as you can see, it looks like a non-CDL setup. Rolling down the highway, my trucks never got pulled over to see if the driver had a CDL, because it does not look like a CDL setup. Now, if you're going to do the CDL setup, I would do this same tire under a set of duals and do, at minimum, the 12,000-pound axles with this wheel and tire combination, but run it weight-wise like if you had 10,000-pound axles. That gives you that level of reserve, so you're not stressing everything to its max and creating its premature demise. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on speccing or equipping your over-the-road hotshot setup. This is how I did my short haul stuff for oil field. My equipment is way overrated. By overrated, I mean there's way more capacity there than it needs. But again, my idea was the flex and twist and ruggedness that this brings for hauling lighter weight in a harsh environment makes for a more durable setup. That's just my 2 cents. Everyone's entitled to their own. I just wanted to share that little bit. It's kind of hard to describe this in words on these Facebook groups, so I figured I'd make a video with some, pictures to illustrate what I'm talking about. Thanks for watching.